Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to move on today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Rudy. Now, I cannot pronounce this. I greatly apologize for butchering this. I looked up translations. Google Translate doesn't have a voice playback on it, so I'm going to try my best here. Hawas Bahr Ally, possibly. Hawas is an Egyptian underground alternative group, which sounds very exciting. So let's dive into this, see what's going on here, and see what Hawas is bringing to the table today. Yeah, so that actually comes in just a hair bit early, about a quarter of a beat early, so it provides like this extra anticipation and then a gap leading back into our downbeat. Downbeats, offbeats, downbeats, yeah, very cool. Call and response between the vocals and the guitars. Very chill and laid back throughout most of it, but it still has a little bit of tension. Our snare accent, or the closest sound to a snare, is on the end of 1 and 4. Really interesting. Oh, it's a cross stick, isn't it? Very fun. Ooh, bringing in some extra weight. Love the flourish on the vocal bit there. Okay. Yeah, a little bit of that wheel modulation. Yeah, this is There is a beautiful metal-based auxiliary percussion instrument there at the end. To my ears, it was very close to like a triangle, but um, it's possible it was something different. But just usually, at least to my ears, it's a metal something hit with another metal something. Um, and it just brought this really interesting brightness out of the final section of the track. Beautiful work. And see, here's the other thing too: is it's an interesting track. I think that's what I really want to focus on right here to start with. We begin the song with the vocals and some sparse instrumentation, really laying down the rhythmic component of the track, and a little bit of the chordal component as well. Our vocals give us a melody, and it has a bit of darkness to it, but overall it feels very bright and bouncy. There isn't a lot of darkness in the atmosphere of it either, in the chordal stuff. It has a little bit to it, but for the most part, it feels rather positive to me. And we go through this back and forth of the smaller section towards a larger section, which I think would we could probably classify as a chorusy type thing. It's when all the instruments come in, um, and we hear tons of layers. I can't even begin to tell you what all the instruments are. I might not even know what all the instruments are. I'm not exceptionally familiar with Egyptian folk instrumentation or what even is still utilized over there. You know, a lot of my instrument knowledge is based around Western music. And so, I do have some information about, like Japanese instruments, I'm pretty knowledgeable about. But when it comes to African instruments, I'm at a real big loss here. It's definitely a blind spot in my education. And Egyptian instruments, and I've got nothing. So I wonder. Actually, I guess I'll do that when I go to check out the lyrics. I'll see if I can find a personnel list or maybe even just a list of instruments played in here. Because I'm quite curious about that. Even if it's more instruments than I can fit into the video in a reasonable amount of time, I'd still like to know just for my own interest. But yeah, there's so many layers. We have guitar-esque sounds. We have drum-esque sounds. I do feel we have a bass kick or some sort of larger bass drum. We have a snare or something with raised edges where you can cross stick on them, which is just placing the middle of the stick across the rim. So you can just kind of pick the stick up and hit it flat across the rim. And you get a clacky kind of pointed sound out of that. There's a synthesizer in here. There's also some stringed instruments that I don't know what they are, but I definitely associate them with this area of the world. Yeah, there's just a lot of layers going on though, and it is very fun because it all bounces off of each other. We have this sound which is making this rhythm and this direction of pitch-wise movement, and then this one has a rhythm that complements it, filling in some of the gaps, and this one fills in the other gaps, and the way that they're all dancing around each other pitch-wise, whether they're rising or falling, is playful as well. It could be rising together, they could be rising together at different intervals. Maybe one is moving up one step at a time over the chord, and the other one's moving up two steps at a time. So we have a 2-to-1 ratio interval rising. They could be going in opposite directions, and it's a really playful composition in all aspects. And I think it's really difficult to listen to this and not move your body. I'm a pretty, we'll call it boring, dry reactor. When I listen, I'm pretty tuned into the music mentally, and I don't really think about what I'm doing with my body. But I know here I waited for a drop, and I like came in with the drop, and the song just makes you want to move. And a lot of it comes from all of the layers, like I was talking about, but then there's also just the pure rhythmic aspect of it. And I want to touch on this real quick before we head into the B section, or maybe even the C section. The ending, though. We got to talk about the ending, of course. But yeah, the rhythmic cadence here is interesting. When we started off the track, we played a series of notes, and then we played a series of notes. I don't remember if they were on downbeats or not. It was groupings of three, right? And we had three groups, and the fourth time around, we started the idea just a hair bit early. And I had mentioned it was about a 16th note early. Might have been an eighth. It felt like a 16th at the time, but it's just a hair bit early. And what that does is it makes it feel like we're rushing, but then we need to fill in that extra space with rest. So it actually feels like it takes longer to get back to beat one. I thought we were actually working with a different time signature in the fourth part of this phrase for a while until I recognized what was going on. And it's all 4/4, but we have that rushing element. And if you speed things up, you're going to have more space at the end of the idea. And that's what happens here. So it actually feels like time shifts around a little bit at the end of this. I don't think we ever revisited that idea, but we switched it out for a different rhythmic swapping, where the first half of the phrase is all downbeats and the second half of the phrase pushes to the offbeats. And I think that's a really fun way to make music. It definitely works really well with creating something that feels groovy, that makes you want to move your body. It's a really easy way to inject, uh, what's the word I want? Groove comes from, that's kind of annoying me. Rhythmic juxtaposition, by changing up the areas that the accents are on. And so that's exactly what we do here, and it works so effortlessly. I'm not going to say that this is, a brand new idea. The concept of having one bar on downbeats and the other bar on offbeats goes back, way, way, way. It's such an old technique, but I mean the reason it stuck around for so long is because it works, and it's especially when you pair it with all the other little ornamental ideas. This little concept over here that shows up, once every other beat, or even the snare, the cross stick I was talking about, that throughout our verse or chorus, one of the two, was accenting on the and of one and four, which creates its own syncopation. That's the word I wanted. The juxtaposition in rhythm is syncopation. Even that creates a type of syncopation, though, because we have a hit on four and then a hit on the and of one, which is 1.5 beats later. So we have this section right here, which is asymmetric within itself because neither one are on the same portion of the beat. One is on the downbeat, one is on the end of the beat. But even against that, there's nothing in between it. From the end of one until we get to four, it's just an empty space. It's a lot of resting. And so that even creates this urgency at the end or beginning simultaneously of the phrase, and this lackadaisical meandering throughout the middle of it. And so that extra urgency also drives groove. It drives the infectious bounce to the song. It makes you want to move with it. And so much of the song really works on that groovy element. Now, none of this could have prepared me for what we saw about 3 minutes into the track when we kind of blew out all of the layers we were listening to and put in this massive, fuzzy, low synth, very techno style, uh, widened out to both sides, just this massive low tone with a ton of fuzz to it. And we kind of went to like this electronic vibe, and we put a new rhythm over that. And then we had our synth solo, and that was really cool. Lots of mod wheel usage to get some element of vibrato out of it. Um, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird, but I'm glad we went in this direction. It's an interesting twist. But what does it all mean? What's the point of it? And that's where our final outro bit came in, and this blew me away, where we took the B section, our verse, I mean, I'm sorry, our chorus, with all the layers and that really bouncy groove. And then we put that within this massive techno-y sound, and it really came together in a way that feels like the old meeting the new. And it just worked so well. If this band makes more music like this, I'm gonna have to check them out because this was really neat. It's this crossing the divide between new music and folk music and putting them together in ways that I don't typically see techno doing. We have folk metal, even the idea of, the modern acoustic guitar and drum kit in folk music, the Americana stuff, even. That feels like a really natural combination of ideas. Um, but for some reason, I don't really think of African or even Middle Eastern music being merged with modern music. Or I should say folk music being merged with modern ideas, and even more specifically, electronic, which techno music tends to be very modern oriented. There really isn't much of a looking back with that style outside of its own history. So I thought this was just a really neat way of doing it, and it absolutely works. By the end of it, the two sides meshed so well that I mean, it was just a joy to listen to. And part of that joy comes from the passion of the singing. There's definitely passion in all the instrumentation too. Nobody in here really feels like they're phoning it in, regardless of how simplistic or repetitive their line is. I think a lot of this just comes from folk music in general, which even across multiple regions tends to be a bit more repetitive, and it's more about being part of the collective than showing off one's own particular skills. But the vocals were just so good. I mean, they're just clean, hitting the note that they need to hit. Anytime that there's flourishes or runs, it feels pitch perfect every time. And the runs themselves just sound so good against the rest of the stuff. Even when we pull in the techno-y stuff and we get these runs, it's so good. And the vocals even join in on some of the rhythmic stuff, providing these accented, syncopated vocalizations of hey or ha, stuff like that, interjected usually on offbeats to provide a syncopated attack against something that doesn't necessarily have one at that moment in the pattern. It just really feels like this fun collective track where everything works together in a way that nobody really outshines another. Um, and it's just real fun to listen to. So I'm going to hit the lyrics, see if I can find a personnel list, and we'll wrap this video up. Now, I'm not going to say I have a strong grasp on the lyrics here. They appear to be just about understanding your place in the world and being happy with what is, uh, being happy that you're alive. And as long as you're happy, you'll continue to live. And it talks about having things out of your control and being able to roll with them. Not to intentionally do a pun, but it does specifically bring in the ideas of waves. It says the wave is destined according to the wind. Yama who lived will see joys, and whoever is happy will live and live. There's a couple of things in it, like Yama, for instance. I don't know exactly what that is. I believe there's a spiritual or religious element to this track that I don't have the information to dig into properly. There's also one part that says, forget the dirt and wash your feet. When will the flag pass you? This sod is a promise and does not fail. And I don't know what a sod is. There's also a concept, if you are gawi, sleep on the flower, or sleep on the feathers, but don't hurt me. And again, I don't know, there's definitely some cultural elements in here that's kind of keeping the meaning of the lyrics at arm's reach for me. So I don't know if you have any extra information on this. Maybe you have some insights into uh, some of the culture that this might be pulling information from, or might be inspired by, I think is a better way of saying that. Let me know down in the comments. But for right here, these are my thoughts on Hawas Bahr Ally. Again, I really hope I pronounced that somewhat close to how it's supposed to be. Let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed it or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on, give me your own perspective on, put all that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to my music, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. I put all, everything in there that's related to the channel. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, we do have a creator request coming up next if you're interested in that, which we have found some really phenomenal smaller bands that are probably on the rise. You'll probably be hearing about them getting pretty big in the next few years, and you can say, hey, I saw them here first on Critical Reactions. But if that doesn't interest you, we do have an album review tomorrow, as well as what's that thing? The live stream on Sundays. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.